Hey students, my name is Tim. I'm the high school pastor at 410. Once upon a time, I went out to the parking lot to start my car and it wouldn't start. Put the key in the ignition, fired it up, nothing happened. And it had been acting weird recently, and I'd kind of concluded in that moment that it was a dead battery. I was pretty certain. Super nice guy came out, helped me jump the car, and so I went immediately to get a new battery, because this is a new battery. And I don't know much about cars, but I can handle putting in a new battery. And the other bonus about this is I'm super cheap, and batteries are pretty cheap fix. And so I was able to handle this myself, not only dealing with my inability to work on cars, but also my cheapness on working with cars. So I had complete control of the situation. Well, about a week or so later, I'm cruising down the highway, and all of a sudden my car basically stopped running. The radio quits, I can't steer the car, nothing in the electrical system is working. So I pull over to the side of the road, I try to get safe, and I ended up having to call a tow truck. It wasn't my battery. I didn't have control of the situation. And a lot of times we face trials in our lives, and the general overview of a trial is it basically drives us to the point of trusting God more. And honestly, that can be anything that reminds you that you are not it. Just like I did when I tried to solve my own battery problem. I wasn't it. I didn't have it all figured out. So it was a challenge for me in a couple of ways. Number one, I didn't know what I was doing. And number two, that even though there wasn't money there, I had to trust in God to provide those things for me. And it was a challenge that I kept having to think about in forcing me to trust God more. So the way I see it, when we face life's difficulties, and they come in all sorts of different ways, it's one of two things going on. Either God is allowing us to live with the consequences of our sin, or life is just happening around us. Let's talk about the sin first. Think about it for a second. If you insult your parents, if you treat them badly, and you're grounded, if you miss the next big event, it's because of something you did. You're dealing with the consequences of your action. You knew what you were getting into when you did it, and you got the results of your act. Those are the consequences. Your parents are hoping you won't do it again, and that gets your attention. Sometimes God does the same thing for us. He allows us to deal with the consequences of our action to get our attention onto something that is going on in our world that is sinful. He wants us to see that the damage that sin is causing to ourselves and to others so that we'll stop it. And so He allows us to live with the consequences of our sin. I've had times when I've lost friends because I was treating people badly. And God used those circumstances to help me understand that it was me that was running these friends off by the way I was treating them. I had to focus on my behavior. God can use the consequences of our sin to affect us in a number of different ways. There's all kinds of ways that will affect us. But the bottom line is that God is trying to get your attention about some sin in your life. He wants you to trust Him more and trust yourself less. And the consequences of that bad decision are what lead us to understanding that. Sin is not doing life God's way. So if He wants us to get your attention, you're going to see that you aren't doing life His way and trust Him more. Now sometimes life just happens to you. Stuff happens. It's not anything you did. It's not something you were directly responsible for. You can't look at your life and go, there's a sin that God is trying to draw my attention to. Maybe your parents are having issues. It has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's a heavy load at school that you can't do anything about. Maybe somebody you know that's hurting and you can't fix it. Maybe it's the world's problems around us. Maybe somebody you know, or maybe even you, are dealing with a serious health issue. Our sin isn't directly responsible for this. But the bottom line is the same. Because we go through these hard times, we go through these difficult things so that we will trust God more. He wants us to trust Him more. So when we run into these issues, these things of life, then some of them are tough. It's so that we can understand Him more and understand ourselves more so that we can trust Him more. And that's all that He wants from us. He knows us best, and He wants us to rely on Him. And I also want you to distinguish real quick between what we like to call the first world problems and real trial. Slow internet is a first world problem. It's not a real trial. Being full from eating too much is not a real trial. I'm talking real trials and real hardships. And the truth is, sometimes life is just life. Stuff happens. Kind of like my car, me stuck on the side of the road waiting on a tow truck. Handle it. But don't be afraid to ask the question, what is God trying to teach me from this? Because when we ask that question, it makes us look at everything around us differently. It puts us in a point where we were more willing to say, God, how can I trust you more? Because that's what He wants from us. And when you do that, you look at everything differently, and you end up focusing more and more on Him and trusting in Him in everything. My name is Tim, and hopefully this is something you can think about. See ya.